Hi, this is Trevor Conquergood. Welcome to this week's RNK Software Club's video of the week. And this week we're going to learn how to create a cool rainbow 3D effect with my name Trevor, and also how you can use the new ripple fill tool to create a cool motif pattern on the inside of your ripple. And I'll show you how to make a rainbow ripple fill heart. So lots of interesting things to learn about this week. And the first thing I'm going to show you guys you might not know is when you've got a cool graphic on your screen and you would like to maybe have an image to show your friends, you could make this into a JPEG or a PNG. And so you can say File and Save As, and instead of saving it to a USB stick and sewing it on your embroidery machine, you can change the format to be an artwork format. So scroll all the way to the bottom and notice we have in here image formats like JPEG and PNG and BMP. Well, if you make it a JPG, it'll get a white background or whatever color is the background of your screen. If you make it a PNG, it will make it a transparent background. And so I created a PNG image of my embroidery design, and this is what it looks like when you bring it up in your window in your browser. So you could put that on a web page or lay it over top of another graphic or a photograph, like combine them together. Because it's transparent, everything that's black would actually be whatever color of you put this on top of. So that's kind of a cool thing to know, that you can make images from your embroidery designs. These are some of the images that I stitched out. So here's the word Trevor, all done cool in 3D. And the trick here was, how did you do the letter O and the letter R? Because what we found out, last week I showed the example of the FTCU, but the thing with FTCU was there weren't any letters that had a hole in it. And that was one of the biggest questions for this week, was how could we do that? Several people asked that on the support this week. So I thought we'd show that. I'm going to click on a new and empty workspace, and what we'll do is we'll learn how to make the word Trevor like that. I started with the lettering tool, and it's the import true type fonts as artwork that I started with. And I just put in my name Trevor and selected a font. You can use whatever fonts you own, but I went with an Arial rounded font. It's one that would have came with Windows. And I chose the bold format and the largest size, and said okay. And so it gives me the word Trevor on the screen. And the first thing I did was click on copy to put like a copy of it on my imaginary clipboard. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the letter T and use the new ripple fill tool. It's right here, ripple fill. So when you choose ripple fill, one of the interesting things about it is that it starts in the center and it kind of ripples around and around and around that shape until it gets to a point on the outside. And one of the unique things about the tool was that you had the ability to select your shape and then use the shape tool, where you could get the entry, or I guess the point that the stitches ripple around, and move them to be wherever you want. It could be anywhere inside of the shape, but it could also be outside of the shape, creating a very interesting 3D look to it. And to do my name, what we did was take and find one common point for all of the letters. You just choose a point and then ripple each letter from that same point. Now, this is where we ran into a problem. It's when you go to the letters R and O that have a hole, right? If you click on the letter R and you click on the ripple fill tool, it wants to ripple the center of the R, or the hole in the R. It's like it ripples whatever is kind of the inside boundary. If it was a smiley face and there were more than one hole, it would ripple the last hole of the face. So what that tells us is ripple fill doesn't really work with shapes with holes. I'm going to just click undo to go back to what I originally had, which was just the artwork of the R, and understand that what's different between the R and the T is that the R has two boundaries, an outside and an inside one. And so to make the letter R work, what I need to do is select it and first break it apart, because really what we see is like one shape, R, is really two shapes. Here, if I unturn off the fill of it, you see it a little more clearly that there's an outside and an inside boundary, and they're combined together here using this tool called Combine. And the opposite of combine is beside it, break apart. And so if I click on break apart, notice now that we end up with like one shape for the outside of the R and a different shape for the center of the R. And so now we can ripple it right. Now you click on the outside of the R, you click on your ripple fill tool, and it will ripple the R. And then you can click on the shape tool and move the little, fancy emanating point of the R down to the same point where you rippled the T from. So at this point, you can decide, do you even need the ripples for the whole? Because I know that later on, I'm going to put a satin border that will define that inside R shape. So now it's like, well, I did do an extra ripple for the whole, but you could have left it out. It's optional, I guess. So what I'm saying is when you come over to the design we're working on, you can also select the shape that represents the inside of the R and ripple that as well. So you click on the ripple fill tool, and then you click on the shape tool to find the point. And I didn't bring it all the way to the center like the other one. I guess you could. That's not wrong. But what I did was kind of go about halfway and said, well, it's a whole of the R, so I'll make it kind of go partway down. I don't know if it really matters. Anyway, then you do the E and the V and the O and the R, and you keep going, right? So remember, when you go to do the O, you got to click on break apart, and then you got to ripple the outside of the O first, and then ripple the inside of the O. I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be first or second, but three-dimensionally, you might actually want to ripple the outside first and then the inside second, and it does not matter which order you click on the rippling. What matters is their sequence in the right-hand side. And so notice that the inside of the hole is actually sequenced before the outside of the hole. And if you want to affect that, then you're going to click on the inside and click the down arrow to make it so after. If it even matters. I'm really not sure it would. So after I'm done kind of like basically doing all of the ripples on all of the letters, then I would click on the paste. And that would bring the whole word Trevor back in a second time. And it's the second set that I would do a steel stitch and make those be the borders for the words, right? So now we're getting close to mine. How'd you rainbowize it? And obviously I just went through and selected the different shapes and then chose colors. But the one thing I didn't want to have was, looking at the sewing sequence, it does like the rippling, and then it comes along, and then it does the borders later. And so this was my kind of trick. I select the rippling for the T, and then I find the steel for the T, and I hold my control key down, and I select that also. So I have both of those first two pieces, and I just used my scissors to cut them right out of the design, and then paste them back in. And what that did was it sequenced those two things together to the end, and I click on the color purple. And then I do R. So then I find here, let's do it right. So there's the inside of the R. Let's make that be after. So it goes the ripple for the R and then the ripple for the whole. And then we'll get the steel stitch for the R. All three of those things. Click on the cut tool, and then paste. And that grouped those together at the end. And now find a color blue in your color palette, scroll through and color that one blue. And then green, and then, so that's kind of how I manually sequenced my design together like that. So notice when I did mine, I stitched it out for the first time. I stitched it out to a point like that, but then I thought it might be kind of cool to actually put my name here and make it kind of look like the name like exploded up like that or something. And so this was another kind of layer to the complexity of it, or not complexity, but the fun I was having. I just kept on going, stitched it again. And so once I kind of built the whole word Trevor in 3D like that, then I started by making another word just for the word Trevor and sort of figured out where it would fit. If you go back to the one that we're making, so if I went to my text tool and just and I just used the block font Anna and put my name in here. So Trevor in Anna font, you decide what size you want it to be, but I think I made it around 10 millimeters or approximately half an inch in size. And then what I did was I moved it down until it looked like it was kind of the size that matched up with the ripples. So somewhere right around that one right there, put it on the T and figure out where it lines up with the R on the other side, right? That's, if you look at mine, it's like the T lines up and the R and the E and the V and the O, and they all kind of lined up with their ripples. And so then there was one little bit left that I had to do, and that was to really make it kind of work, was I got rid of all of the extra little bits of stitching underneath. And that was a whole nother sort of little lesson that I could share with you guys. And that would be, how did you do that? And so in that case, I went into stitch edit mode. Now you can select these ripples and go into stitch mode and like actually interact with their stitches and literally just click on the delete tool and delete. So basically go back to the kind of the beginning of it and click delete, 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 until you delete all of the stitches up until wherever the first one that you don't want to delete is. Notice that I instinctually didn't take out the first one. I'm in stitch mode now, and I really should record a video just to review stitch mode, but if you can kind of follow along, I clicked on this tool, stitch mode, and notice when you're in stitch mode that you can mouse around to select the what stitch of your design that you're going to either move, delete, add new stitches in. And in my case, I wanted to delete the ones, and I was just going to show you how to figure out where the first stitch was. So notice if I click on this stitch right here, and it says needle change, color change, and then it can use along this little window down at the bottom right here to go to the next stitch. That's the first normal. There's a 1, and then it goes all the way up to here. So notice I've got one last stitch that says normal. I'm going to delete that. And that gets rid of all of it. So don't delete the one that says color change. Just delete the ones that say normal. So here, let me do it again. Now we're going to do the color blue. So select somewhere along that line and then use the little arrows down at the bottom to go backwards to the beginning, to the very beginning, until you see the word, and I'm looking in here in my properties box. I'm going backwards one stitch at a time until I find the stitch point that says needle change. So now I'm at the needle change to the color blue. I'll go forward to the first normal and then start hitting delete, 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 and keep hitting delete on the keyboard until I get rid of whatever stitches I want. And so this is one that I said, really, I'm planning to do a video someday about, to really kind of dig in on stitch edits and show some of the great things that are great about stitch edits. But you can see how I was able to trim the stitches out. Now that you get to it and you're like, well, you missed a few. Okay, fine, sure. So there's a few more to take out, right? Just select one of them and then click delete, 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 delete. There, they're gone. So that's easy. And so all of these things that I showed you today are easy. And what I haven't shown you, so now there's one more thing, and I'm sorry, today's video is a little on the long side, but so we've looked at doing the word Trevor and how we could kind of create that cool 3D effect. Now, how'd you make the cool rainbow heart? It's got a ripple pattern, but the ripple pattern appears to have a cool, like a chain stitch along it, Trevor. How did you do that? So let's go ahead and come back over to this sort of design, the empty sort of space. Maybe what I'll do is just clean up all the mess that's on it. Or even better, start a new empty workspace, Trevor. Leave that mess where it is in case you want to talk about it again. And come to your custom shapes library and just get that shape of that heart. So it was one of our shapes that comes with the software, a basic heart. I clicked on the ripple fill tool and it ripples around and around and around. And this time what we're going to study is the properties box and all the different variables for a ripple fill. And so the first one you'll notice is that it says single run. And so notice that when it ripples, it's going forward, 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 like the straight stitch of a sewing machine from the center to the outside. If you select that heart and then come and try the little box where it says single run, you can change it to be a double run, a bean, a half bean, or a motif. So let's go through them. A double run, click apply. Now, I'll note right away, I'm going to click undo, and I'm just going to point out that the design has 2,700 stitches. And when I change it to be a double run and click apply, the design now has 4,500 stitches. So notice that something has changed, even though it doesn't appear anything changed. If we watch it sew now, it starts in the center, travels round and round and round to the outside, And then when it gets to the outside, it goes backwards, round and round and round to the center again. And so a double run does a pass to the outside and then back. Therefore, a double run line. A triple or a bean stitch is going to also be more stitches. So now we're up to 6,800 stitches. And when we go along the line, it will go forward, forward, back, forward, forward, back, and travel from the center to a point on the outside. So a triple ply means every stitch gets done 3 times, forward, forward again, and then 1 step back. And so you are able to, I guess, choose whether it's a single line, a run line, double run line, bean line. Half bean adds an extra layer of kind of like thickness to it. And so notice now that they all kind of have a little bit of an offset to them. They may not all be appropriate in all shapes, but there are times when each one of these look really interesting. The one thing you might want to consider, for example, is the stitch length and the density. So let's just go back to doing a regular old bean stitch. Of course, when you do a bean stitch, you have the choice of 3 plies, but you can make it even more bold, 5, 7, 9. If you do a 7-ply bean stitch, you may want to make more space between the rows so that the lines aren't sort of too heavy and closing up. And so that's called the density. The density is the space between the rows, and it's set at 2. If I make it 6, you'll get more space. So you can set that distance in between. The stitch length is the distance from one needle penetration to the next one along the lines that it's creating. And so that's the bean stitch. Now, another thing that you can control is the pattern. So right now we're just all kind of a normal stitching pattern. Every row is an equal distance, but you can change to gradient patterns. So there's increasing, decreasing, convex, and concave. So increasing will start as the kind of the open spacing and then get tighter and tighter and tighter. Here, let's change the density so you can see a little bit more kind of what's happening. So increasing starts at the most open and gets tighter as it goes. Decreasing is the opposite. So now it's going to change the direction. And then you've got convex and concave. And so with concave, it goes from tight to open and back to tight again. And convex is the opposite of that. And so those things are all things that you can control. Now I've got a 7-ply bean stitch in a concave pattern that'll make a really nice bold line along that radial effect. So radial fill is really a fun tool. Now, when you change to the motif, now you choose from your different motif patterns to get applied along that line. And the first thing we're going to consider here is we're probably going to need to open the spacing up to allow for room for these motifs. I mean, it's not a rule that you have to, but generally speaking, I have found that going to nice big numbers allows more room for the motifs to apply along the rows. So here, let's turn the no gradient of face spacing, so just the motif at 10 millimeters apart, and now you can see kind of like how it looks. If you want to put a gradient or a concave or a convex effect on that, you might need to play with the numbers until it kind of looks more appropriate. But basically, the main thing I want you to learn is if you are using the motif patterns, study the number of stitches. So with this motif pattern, currently I'm getting like 9,700 stitches. But some patterns may be too or elaborate and create even higher stitch counts. And so if I try this one, it went down to 7,700. And so you'll notice a real variety depending on how many sort of stitches. Now I've got one that's only 3,900. So that's like a third of the number of stitches. Another thing to know is that when you do choose one of these patterns, you can also change the space between the motifs and the scale of them. So if you needed to choose a more elaborate pattern, then maybe part of what you would need to do is also have a larger scale for it to have a little bit larger stitches. So come in here and make that 120% of the original size or something like that, and the motifs get bigger. And like I said, you can come in here and add space in between them and then have, more or less of them. So this is how I was able to create the interesting effect on the heart. If I select the heart, you'll see exactly how it was set up. I used a motif pattern number 1 at a density of 4 with a concave pattern scale set at 100. Now, how did I get it to be a rainbow? Well, that was kind of a cheat because I used our cool rainbow tool. There's a new tool in the software. It's actually a whole new program. If you buy the cool, color spectrum thread set, it's been a free gift, you guys. The rainbow tool. I use the rainbow tool to rainbow colorize it. But that said, I'll just also show you, if I hit undo, you could rainbowize it yourself. Click on the selecting tool, draw so far, say, okay, that's where I want my first color stop to be. Click stop, and then move along a little further. That's where I want my next color stop to be. Click stop, and now you'll have stops within your design that you can go ahead and choose different colors from. And so that is another kind of way to insert your rainbow color stops in yourself. Oh my goodness, I really went around the horn with a lot of different sort of topics today. I hope I didn't leave you guys a little bit confused. The good news is you can always rewind and watch it again. Just know that we enjoy your interest in our videos, and we hope you enjoyed today's. So have fun watching the rainbow 3D ripple fill effect. And until next week, thanks for watching, and bye for now.